for the first and second trial, once again, I was able to observe Heath Antonio's compassion, integrity, and polite nature. I emphasize these attributes because I strongly believe that everyone deserves to be treated cordially and with respect, even when a person is getting arraigned or is found guilty. I have no doubt that if this council confirms him, Heath Antonio will remain the same highly cordial and compassionate person he is when performing his job as a judge. In my opinion, Heath Antonio has demonstrated to be a well-grounded attorney by the way he handles himself in the courtroom, by being a thorough, experienced, and effective attorney, and in combination with his knowledge of the law, integrity, and values, he will be a great asset as a judge in the Commonwealth. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming. I appreciate that. That was very good. On with the meeting.
Thank you for coming. Tell me, what type of interaction do you have as an interpreter with the nominee?
Well, not only, like I mentioned, I work in court, but many times I'm honored when attorneys call me to work with behind the scenes with them. Heath Antonio is one of the attorneys that usually when he gets a Spanish-speaking client, he will call me from the get-go. So we will meet in jail, if that's the case, with the clients from the very beginning, even if it's after arraignment, if the person is going to be held on the dangerousness, he and I are going to go to the jail to meet with the client. If he is not going to be held, he and I are going to be meeting with the client in his office from arraignment all the way to the preparation to trial. So I interact with him quite often.
So about how many cases have you been with him?
Interpreting behind the scenes.
Well, I don't know behind the scenes.
I mean, I will explain, and I'm so sorry. So behind the scenes, I call it when I work with him out of court, in his office or at the jail if need be.
Okay.
That would be perhaps 30 cases. For interpreting in court, I don't know, because maybe it was just an arraignment, maybe a pre-trial, and pre-trials, as you know, could be 20 pre-trials, could be 2 pre-trials, and the case goes forward.
So what is his demeanor to someone who speaks just Spanish?
So this is something I absolutely love about him. There is a huge challenge when an attorney represents someone whose English is not the first language, because you have very likely the barrier of education. And that is something that happens with a lot of the Spanish-speaking population that gets involved in the judicial system. So he will always make sure that not only the person can hear what's happening or what he's facing in his native language, but he will make sure that we spend the time that's necessary to educate the person, not just to hear the words in Spanish, but to really comprehend what is happening in his life or the potential of what could happen in the next months or years.
Well, that's very good, for that instruction. Very good. Well, your testimony means a lot to me. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you kindly.
Thank you. Councilor Kennedy.
I want to say I appreciate what the court interpreters do for us. I'm in court every day and have to rely on you folks a lot. And I think you're probably underappreciated, and I know you're definitely underpaid. And I just want to thank you for your service.
Thank you kindly for your
Councilor Jacobs.
Thank you. I said to you before, but I'm so happy you're here. It's really exciting to me to have you here as a witness. And I just want to echo what Councilor Kennedy just said, and that, you know, access to justice is an area that I'm really appreciate the efforts that are happening. And of course, we can always do better, but the work that you do is so important and such a key component. And so I just want to say thank you so much for all that you do. And I would welcome an opportunity to discuss at some point how we could be doing better, because I know we can always do better. I think Councilor Kennedy alluded to financially we could do better, but I will say just in, you know, what I hear back from Western Mass is that we have such a shortage of resources that some of our courts literally have to carve out a specific day just to be able to make sure the resource is available. So they'll have, you know, like Spanish Day on a Tuesday. in Holyoke or something as an example. And so thank you for all you do, and I hope to see your ranks increase.
Thank you so very much. And it's been an honor. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You're very articulate and very passionate, and I appreciate you coming today. Pleasure. All right, anyone else in favor of the nominee? There are none. Anyone opposed to the nominee? There are none. We're gonna close this part of the hearing. And now we're gonna hear from the nominee, why we should vote yes next week to make you a judge in the district court. The floor is yours, sir.
Good morning, councilors. I am honored and humbled to be here today for your consideration as an Associate Justice of the District Court. I'm grateful to Governor Haley and Lieutenant Governor Driscoll for the honor of nominating me for the council's consideration. I would like to please thank Chief Legal Counsel Paige Scott Reed, Deputy Counsel Dara Kasselheim, Valerie McCarthy, and the members of Governor Haley's staff for their guidance and assistance. I would like to also thank the Judicial Nominating Committee for their dedication and their hard work on behalf of the Commonwealth. I would like to please thank and acknowledge my witnesses, the Honorable Justice Rafi Yasayan and Christina Bernal, who took the time out of their busy schedule to travel here today and to speak to the council. I'd also like to thank my loving wife, Raquel, for being here today. We've been married for 21 years and have 2 children, Rebecca and Jacob. Rebecca is 19 years old and she just started her sophomore year in college and is studying to become a child psychiatrist. She just moved in and is in her 2nd full day of classes today. Jacob is 14 years old and started high school as a freshman this week. This is his 2nd full day of classes and as a freshman, and he has his first varsity soccer match this afternoon. I have been representing clients as a bar advocate in the district court and the superior courts for the past 20 years. My wife is an elder law advocate for the South Coastal Counties Legal Services, and this October will be her 25th year providing indigent clients with legal advocacy in our hometown of New Bedford. Raquel also serves as the Portuguese interpreter at the office, translating for the Portuguese-speaking clients and advocating for their rights and their access to services. We have always stressed to our children the values of humility, empathy, and hard work. If I am fortunate enough to serve as a district court judge, these values will be bedrock principles of my work on the bench every day. I am the first person on either side of my family to attend college. My paternal grandfather was a fisherman in Gloucester from the Algarve region of Portugal and passed away when my father was young. My paternal grandmother worked as a waitress as a single mother, raising 3 children on her own. My father selflessly left school before finishing high school to help financially support the family. He has worked in sales his entire life, working tirelessly from a kitchen cabinet salesman to rise to the point of owning his own real estate agency as a real estate broker. He recently retired this year, and I am so proud of his accomplishments from such humble beginnings. My maternal grandparents were part of the Greatest Generation, and my grandfather was a World War II veteran in the Navy and a lifelong worker for New Bedford Gas and Electric. My grandmother was a pediatric nurse serving the children of New Bedford community for over 40 years. My mother worked for years at New England Telephone and then in the food service industry while raising 3 children with my father's long self-employment work hours. My parents taught me the core values of education, a strong work ethic, respect, and compassion. My parents also taught myself and my younger brother and sister to do everything in life, whether it be sports, school, or work, to do it with heart. It's a lesson and a philosophy that I carry with me every day. I am 50% deaf. I'm fully deaf in my right ear and was born without a right ear canal. I can remember as a child in elementary school, leaving class early for one-on-one speech therapy sessions down the hall. Who would have thought that I'd grow up to be a trial lawyer? In my own small way, I appreciate the hardships presented in life and recognize the innate ability of people to overcome these hardships and thrive. I also recognize the need to help and empathize with people who have not been given the same opportunities that my parents gave me. Where you start in life does not have to be where you finish. This is a lesson I've always kept with me, and it's a philosophy that will be a guiding principle for my work in the district court if I am fortunate enough to serve on the bench. I attended Stonehill College and then Suffolk University Law School. At that time, the law school was at its old location behind the State House on Temple Street. Self-funding my own legal education, I commuted every day from New Bedford. This was before the Lakeville commuter rail and even before the high-speed lane was on the expressway. So I would take the American Eagle bus to school every day from New Bedford. I had lunch many times in the Ashburton Street courtyard across the State House here as a law student. So it's truly an honor to sit here for your consideration 30 years later. As a part-time job, I used to scoop ice cream for years at Friendly Ice Cream, and then I waited tables across the street at Red Lobster. Until this year, I paid my monthly student loans for 25 straight years and self-financing my legal education. Wanting to be a trial lawyer, I would serve as an assistant district attorney in Bristol County under the late Paul F. Walsh. The courtroom was actually where I found my calling. Shy and quiet on a personal level, I actually found my comfort level in front of a jury. I would go to trial any chance I could, and I found my focus and calling in advocating for victims and for the people of the Commonwealth. I always treasured my time in the DA's office with its sense of purpose, ethics, camaraderie, and passion displayed by the prosecutors, victim witness advocates, and staff every day. I also learned then the firsthand ability of a district court judge to have an incredible impact on people's lives. I saw the start of Judge Kane's then new Changing Lives in Literature program and the new drug recovery court in the Bedford District Court run by Judge Sabre. As a young prosecutor, I observed firsthand the power and the ability of a district court judge to positively influence the lives of people most in need. When I opened my own law practice in the city of New Bedford, I would find a new calling where I now served as a zealous advocate for those most in need. I am proud to have fiercely represented the least fortunate clients in my own hometown for the past 26 years. I've been trying cases at the ground level of district court and superior court for a combined 26 years. I'm thankful that I've had a busy superior court practice in the last 10 years because it has taught me perspective. Superior court defense practice frequently deals with the potential of lengthy state prison time and mandatory minimum prison sentences. But with district court, we have individuals that will be returning to society in a relatively short span of time. While there are certainly cases where incarceration is appropriate and necessary, I truly believe the focus in the district court needs to be on rehabilitation and reducing recidivism. With that in mind, I really think it's an exciting time in district court. The focus on the access to justice and the availability of programs is more widely available than ever before. Wonderful programs like Recovery Court, Mental Health Court, Changing Lives in Literature, Youth Build, all with the goals of addressing historically underserved members of our society, are now more widely available. If I am appointed as an Associate Justice of the District Court, I would very much like to be a part of some of these life-changing programs. I believe that a judge that exercises empathy, compassion, and dignity for all individuals, both inside and outside of the courtroom, is truly committed and dedicated to the district court's role as a community court. Over my 20 years of criminal defense practice, I've represented hundreds of indigent clients whose lives and families have been tragically affected by poverty, substance abuse, physical disability, intellectual and mental health disabilities, language barriers, and a lack of access to justice and services. And perhaps most importantly, I have seen countless clients and probationers excel and shine when truly given the tools and the opportunity to transcend their obstacles. For example, earlier this year, I had a random encounter with a prior client of mine who is now living a happy, productive life. Back in late January of this year, I had knee surgery and I was at the doctor's office for follow-up. I was wearing a full leg brace on crutches and waited in the lobby while Raquel went and got the car. An individual working the valet parking came up to me and asked me if I was a lawyer. I replied yes, and he said, "I thought it was you." He then proceeded to take out an old crumpled up business card of mine out of his wallet, and he told me he kept it in his wallet just in case. He told me that when I went to see him in jail, it was at his lowest point and that I had done him a real solid. And he proudly said, "Look at me now," and showed me the badge on his coat that he was a supervisor of the valet parking. I was feeling lousy that day with my knee, but it was absolutely made my day. And while talking with him, I actually didn't recognize him as a prior client. I looked him up at the office later, and it was almost 10 years ago that I represented him in the Bedford District Court. And so the work done in district court changes lives every day. This was a reminder of how good a job a case can have a ripple effect for years to come, even if you don't see it at the time. And this is quite frankly what drove me to apply. A district court judge has the ability to help so many because the court touches so many lives on a daily basis. What may seem like a routine event in court to a judge or to a lawyer can be a major turning point in someone's life. The lesson is that there are no routine cases in district court. Every case has a ripple effect, and every case can be a force to change the course of a life. I respectfully submit that a district court judge needs to have the experience and the understanding to use that force for good, and I am eager to do that. This was one story of a past client. I'm 52 years old. If you choose to confirm my nomination after 18 years on the bench in service to the people of the Commonwealth, I should have 100 of those stories to tell. So I thank you, councilors, for allowing me to speak on your behalf and to tell you about my life, my family, my experiences. And I thank you for your time and consideration, and would be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you so much. Your resume is just spectacular, and we could spend 2 days going through everything you've done. It's just incredible. So we're going to start with giving the councilors an opportunity to question you. Council Devaney, you go first.
Thank you for your time. It was a busy week for me, and you accommodated me, and I really appreciate that. First of all, I like the idea that you had your own private practice for 20 years. My feeling is that, you chose who you were going to represent. And your response, and I think you have an idea when you have attorneys come in and the responsibility, because you've had it, you have to pay the rent, you got to shovel the snow and all of that. So I think that adds to it. The other thing is, I like your pro bono. That's very important to me. And that's where your compassion comes in, that you have done a lot of pro bono helping people who can't afford a lawyer. That means a lot to me. Can you tell me any particular one that stands out that you remember, the pro bono case?
Pro bono, I had a mother come to me one time in the courtroom, and she wanted me to represent her daughter's interests as a victim in a sexual assault case. And I didn't charge her, I did it pro bono. And she had just seen me in the courtroom and approached me. And met with them in the office a couple times, got the background. She had medical issues, so we built up the background for her history. And defense attorney doing his job was trying to bring up Fifth Amendment issues and things like that. And so I brought her to court, brought her to the courtroom, the trial session in the afternoon one day when I knew it was quiet, so she could sit and explain her role in the proceedings. And at the end of the day, the case ended up being a change of plea. Obviously that was a pro bono case for me. I'm thankful and happy for the outcome. And I like to think I had a small part in getting to the point where she didn't have to testify. And so that's probably the case I'm most proud of, pro bono side. Years ago, I got an award from Judge Lestady for pro bono work in the probate court. And that was for, typically I would take referrals for victims of domestic violence. And I would bring them to the district court and guide them through the 209A process. So I'm proud of that work as well.
We talked about, I asked you if there was any general bias in the court, and we talked about that. And what is your response?
Well, I think we're all familiar with Justice Gant's report. I mean, the numbers don't lie. I think.
Well, yeah, that we first talked about general, then we talked about racial, and you said you really didn't see it. But I mean, Judge Gant's, rest his soul, that report was very, very intense, very meaningful. So it does exist.
I agree. And the numbers don't lie, like we spoke about. And I think a judge on the bench has to be acknowledged and be aware of the implicit bias in the courtroom throughout the entire criminal proceeding. And from the initial search and seizure law and the issues arising there, to most importantly, the charging decision a lot of times. Justice Gant's report highlighted how crucial the charging decision is, and the biases that numbers don't lie show. And why is this person charged with B&E for a misdemeanor, and this person's charged with a home invasion? And so just from the start in district court, a judge has to be aware of that implicit bias from the charging decision, obviously through arraignment, bail, through pretrial, and obviously sentencing and trial. So I think a wonderful starting point is the implicit bias jury instruction. I recently had a district court trial and the instruction was given 3 times during the initial introduction to the pool, during the before opening statements, and then before closing arguments. So that as a judge is a starting point, and that would be my starting point every day at the start of the day.
There's a lot of concern about the bail system. So can you tell me bail system and how it works and how it doesn't, and how you'd like to see it? Would you like to see it change, and how would you change it?
This is one of my passionate issues, is inequity in bail situations, and I spoke with Councilor Jacobs about this for a while too. I was born in New Bedford. I'm a homeowner for 21 years there. This is where I raised my family, and it's a gateway community with struggles. And a bail set at $500 in New Bedford might be someone held without opting out, versus a bail in other parts of the state where they'll take that $500 out of their wallet and post it right then and there. So bail inequities has always been a passionate issue of mine. I think it has changed a little bit since the Lanigan decision came out, and we've had to analyzing someone's financial condition, either they be able to post bail, but it's still a passionate issue for me in that it's a person who's still presumed innocent on a case. And I think the inequities of an area, a city like a gateway city like New Bedford and Fall River, have to be taken into account when hearing bail arguments. I think you said what will change. I think on a basic level, I think it is always a good thing to have judges on the bench that are familiar and even live in the area in which they are now serving on the bench, to understand the fabric of the community, to understand the struggles of the community, only makes for better decisions. And certainly I think better decisions on bail.
When someone comes to court, they have a family member that is addicted, so they go to court seeking some relief. Okay, it doesn't always work very well, does it? And there's not always justice served. Tell us about that. And then I'm gonna ask you, if it's not being done properly, and if you see it, how would you change it?
I know we spoke about the Section 35 process, and the one thing that that upsets me is that it's an addiction situation where typically a family member is coming for a last resort of help, petition in a district court, asking that a person be committed to a treatment facility against their will, because the addiction is so out of control. And you see family members and clients at a loss because of the addiction issues. And the petitioner will go before the court asking the judge for permission, and then typically the police department in the city will bring that person into custody to the courthouse to be interviewed by a court clinician, a forensic psychiatrist, to offer an opinion to the judge as to whether that person meets the criteria. There's no crime involved, there's no arrest, it's an addiction disease issue. So the one thing that I always gets under my skin is the fact that the person is typically put in a holding cell, either next to or even with overnight arrests and people who have been arrested for crimes. And I stood there many times while the evaluation takes place between the client and the psychiatrist, in a cell right next to everyone else with no privacy, no basic human respect for what that person is going through at the time. So it's one of my little pet peeves, is that that's a situation that arises for someone under the disease of addiction. And a small way, it depends on the facility, and I understand fiscal, but maybe a little wing of a section of a building could be separated from other custodies, so that and it does happen in some jails, but not all, in some facilities, so that there's that privacy in that respect for someone coming into those circumstances.
I have to tell you that the council voted to time us, so that's why I'm not giving you enough time, I don't think. Tell me about your opinion about minimum mandatory.
Respectfully, I'm not in favor of them. Minimum mandate, I've been practicing for 25 years. Minimum mandatories are sentencing without context. They're sentencing without consideration for the human being and the individual in front of you. And so in general terms, I'm not in favor of them at all.
I'm not for it. I really think that the judge should have discretion. I really do. We talked about, you've had all kinds of cases, kidnapping and everything, murder cases. Is there one murder case that comes to, that stands out in your mind that you never forget?
We talked about a case that haunts me to this day. It was only 2 summers ago, but it was a murder case that I was co-counsel on in Fall River Superior Court. And it was a circumstance where the defendant was a college graduate, working as a computer engineer, married and a homeowner. And he always had substance abuse issues, right below the surface, but was a functioning addict, for lack of a better word. And there were problems at home, and he dove deep into addiction to the point where he left his home, left his family, left all his contacts, and was living in a homeless encampment in the woods of New Bedford. And it was one of the, I would call a hidden homeless situation, where there was this encampment of similar people, all just feet off the woods on a well-traveled road in New Bedford, that I probably would drive by a couple times a month, not even knowing that's there. And it got to the point where this client of mine was completely in the throes of addiction, and that's all that mattered. And we're just living with homeless individuals in the woods that were struggling with the same issues of addiction and mental health at this point in time, and severe paranoia. He gets into an argument with another person in the camp, and a knife is involved, and a murder happens. And it's a tragedy for the victim, for the victim's family, for everyone involved, that it got to this point in time. And we had a psychiatrist, a forensic psychiatrist, testify about the issues of diminished capacity, and how the severe paranoia and drug use might not have rose to the level of someone with the intent for first or second degree murder. And I think that the jury agreed with that argument. They came back on a manslaughter conviction. But the thing that haunts me to this day are the photos of the camp, of the homeless camp, and to see the deplorable conditions that these individuals were living at. And it was heartbreaking to see, and it was even more heartbreaking to realize that on the way to errands on Saturday morning, I was probably about 20 feet away through the woods. And that one case just encapsulated so many issues of a city like New Bedford, with substance abuse and homelessness and mental health difficulties, that it's a case that really haunts me to this day.
Right, now, we talked about you've had a lot of varied cases, and you've had experience in the Superior Court as well. Now, you're going in the district court, and you've been there, what, 20 years?
Yes.
So you have a lot of experience, you've seen a lot of changes. What do you think should be changed now? What could make it better? Is there something that you see?
Well, in my 25 years as a prosecutor and defense attorney, district court has come a long way. And certainly there's more to go, but I think we've come a long way since when I started. The access to services now has never been better. And I would just like to see that continue to be acknowledged, continue to grow, continue to be funded. In the Bedford District Court, in the pretrial session, when you walk into the courtroom, there's a table set up right before you walk into the session for Project North. A wonderful, relatively new program for anyone to pick up flyers, sign up, get information to, speak to the caseworker. And we need something like that in all the courtrooms, particularly in the gateway cities and all the courtrooms of the gateway cities that have struggled with these issues. So that's one immediate change that I would like to see, is just that continued focus on the access to services.
Yeah, I talked to you about pandemic. I was very concerned during the pandemic. And out of all the cases I was most concerned about was the 209A. Because you have, to me on the phone, someone's being accused. And you really want to look at the person's eyes, see their body language. And that concerned me, if justice was really served that way. But you continued working on it. Tell me about how you got through that.
Council Devaney, if you could wrap it up after this, I'd
I'm
appreciate it.
sorry, what?
It's 15 minutes.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it's ridiculous, because I think people should hear it. Would you let him?
Sure, absolutely, sure.
Okay.
That was a difficult time for everyone. And I think judges, attorneys, particularly court personnel, all did the possibly best we could at that time. Looking back, what you said about a suggestion about the 200 days, that was a difficult time. Where
Well,
hearings,
restraining orders really bothered me,
Right.
because how can you see in a phone what
Right.
that person is like?
and hearings were done, initially, they were done on speakerphone. And you wouldn't see anyone, and it was just verbal. And obviously, that is a less than ideal situation. I think, my memory serves me, that didn't last too long, and pretty soon, the folks were kicking right into Zoom. And 290s were one of the few things that you would come into court still for. Because I think everyone realized this can't be the way we do it and continue to do it. So I don't think that lasted too long. Courts opened up initially primarily for the arraignments and the bails and for restraining orders. And so it was a difficult time with custodies in
And
jail.
you kept open, and you kept.
Everything kept open,
Some courts closed.
everyone kept trudging through it. And we had custody clients that were held without jury trials for an extended time. I'm glad it's over.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that I got over COVID a week and a half ago, and I've got a bad cold, and I'm gonna wear this mask if I'm near anyone, and I think I'm at a distance that I'm safe, but I did want to say that because my voice is not
Thank
clear.
you so much.
I hope you can hear me.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much.
Councilor Iannella.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I don't have any question. He speaks very, very highly of you, Councilor, very highly of you. I listened to him when he talked, and I doesn't talk and speak and call people often, but he calls on your behalf, so if your name comes before the council, you can count on it.
Thank you, Council.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Duff.
Thank you so much. Love talking to you. Just a great, long conversation. I only want to talk about two of the things you talked about because one of them happens unfortunately very timely in my community. Over the where we had a transgender student attacked, very badly beat up, facial bones broken in their face, they stomped on their head, nerve damage that probably will be irreversible. And then they left them in the woods in a Friday night. And where I live in Dogtown, you can get eaten by animals. It's the woods. They're considering whether it's a hate crime. I think it's attempted murder. But I bring it to light because it's not okay, and we as adults are doing something wrong or missing the mark if we still have kids attacking other kids like this. And so I just wanted to bring that up. We had a long talk about it. But it's just so disturbing in the fact that they were considering it as a hate crime. That was just like, this child could have died.
I was in the DA's office, served started out in district court, and then I was promoted to Superior Court, and I was the chief of the Civil Rights Division and under Paul Walsh in the DA's office, and primarily reviewing hate crime allegations for indictment to Superior Court. So I'm well aware of that. I agree with you, 110%, Counselor.
Yeah.
That should be, in my humble opinion, accordingly.
It's, as I've said many times, and my colleagues are probably sick of hearing it, but especially the transgender thing, it's a hard issue for a lot of people. I get that. It's a hard issue to get your arm and your head around, but this is a real thing. And you don't try to kill somebody or beat them up to the point where you're stomping on their head. I mean, other than attempted murder, what were you trying to do? So anyway, I just wanted to bring that up because unfortunately it's very raw and fresh for us right now. The other thing that we talked a little bit about, and I want to talk about this more because you gave me some great insight on it, that I have been talking to a lot of younger, they can be anywhere in their 20s, 30s, or 40s, women of color, Black and brown women particularly, who have been prescribed medication for often traumas, ADHD, there's a whole plethora of things. And they go to get the prescriptions. The doctors won't refill the prescriptions. because they're afraid they're gonna sell the pills. You know, and I had one young woman say to me, and this gal had been very severely sexually assaulted, and it's, you know, that never leaves you, unfortunate. And it's been a mental health crisis ever since. She said, I need this medicine. When I was in college, the white kids were selling these pills, but they could just go and get them like a candy dispensary. And, you know, as a white woman, it literally never occurred to me. And I'm so disturbed by it, that are people that need medication that aren't getting it. And I wanted to know if you could share some of your experience with that.
I think as a bar advocate for 20 years, there's still a stigma attached, unjustly so, to mental health difficulties. And I have clients that are on prescribed medication from physicians, PTSD, and
PTSD, yeah, that's the other, you were talking about medications. I don't really know a lot. I know the ADHD stuff, but I don't know some of the other stuff.
post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yeah.
And when they are held at a facility, incarcerated, they're not given those medications. And some of it I think is bias, and some of it has to do with the stigma attached with people still see mental health not in the light it should be seen.
Have you ever seen it? Have you ever seen Black or brown people be more targeted on this? I mean, I know that's a vast question. I guess I bring it up because it was so absolutely shocking to me.
Sure.
That one person, and we're talking about people who, a lot of these people are dependent on public services. Okay, so they don't have private insurance. One young woman told me that she's mixed race, that the only reason she got the medication one time because her mother went into the doctor's appointment with her. Are you kidding me? Because they don't believe them. They think they're gonna sell these pills because they're the color of their skin. Is there anything a judge can do about that? I mean, it's crazy.
I think it goes back to the issue we were discussing about implicit bias.
Yeah.
And not only in the legal setting, but branching out into the issue we're discussing here today. And as a judge, I can take it one case at a time, one individual at a time, and recognize that issue, address it to the extent I can, and slowly over time, hopefully, I can add to the conversation that we're having today about this issue.
I would think particularly people who are incarcerated that are prescribed the medicine, that you would want them to have, right? I mean, that it would be helpful to them. I mean, you can see I'm verklempt by this whole thing because it was just so out of the blue for me. But for me, you know, and I told this to some of the legal counsel, this is going to be something I'm going to be doing a lot of research and talking about for the few months that I still have here.
Sure.
Because to me, this is such an important issue. The denial or the disbelief, that's what some of it is the disbelief that these young people need this stuff to function. And then some of them said to me, that's why they smoke pot. They said it's the only thing that they can regulate. I mean, it's just completely upside down to me.
In whatever role mine is, I would love to take part of that conversation.
Well, thank you. And thank you for listening to it because, you know, this is one of these things I'm just kind of throwing it at you. I don't know what you can do about it, but it's like spaghetti. You got to keep throwing it at the wall until it sticks. And someone will hear it and someone may be able to raise their hand and say, I can help with that. Because I do feel, and you know, unfortunately for my colleagues have had to listen to me for 12 years that, you know, you have to say the things aloud over and over and over when it's something that is really important to you, like the LGBT things and stuff like that. So people hear it, you know, it's not really for me, it's for everybody else. So anyway, thank you. You've stellar resume. great recommendation from your home counselor. But all the research I've done on you, you know, all the people we've called about you, all the due diligence and background, you know, what we do isn't just in this room. It goes on for hours and hours and hours behind the scenes. And you're just, again, a stellar applicant, and thank you for applying.
Thank you, Counselor.
So thank you.
Counselor Duff, Counselor Kennedy.
She has up to 2 a.m. because of the election, which is like normally. Okay, so let's see. You started out at Finneran Byrne, that would be Judge Byrne. Dressler, that would be Judge Dressler, and O'Brien, and now Judge Antonio. I think I gotta get a job at that firm. We spoke on the phone, we had a long conversation. I wasn't sure if I was gonna make it here because I had court this morning, but I did manage to. That's why I spent so much time on the phone. I love your resume. I love the 20 years of private practice. That's what we need on the bench. People who can understand what it's like, be out in Dudley Court and be rushing to somewhere else and having to get out of there quickly. That's what it's all about. And your counselor, Counselor Ferrara, I think I told you would break my arms if I didn't vote for you. You have my vote next week. I'm very, very pleased with it. Looking forward to seeing you on the bench.
Thank you, Counselor.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor DePaul.
Thank you, Counselor. Good afternoon, or morning, almost afternoon. Counselor Ferreira and actually Counselor Kennedy in a conversation are big supporters of yours. I like your background. I wanted to ask you a couple questions about things that have come up today. So in your application, you noted it's kind of over the scope of your practice, seeing younger folks who you represented in district court land in Superior with like habitual offender, right? And so well, I'm not going to speak for you. Is that like a problem that can be addressed? Is it a problem that needs to be addressed? And if so, is it something as a district court judge you're in?
Yes. One of the reasons I applied was last 10 years I've been very busy in a Superior Court practice. And I'm at the point now after 20 years that I see they were kids back then, young individuals, young adults.
Yeah.
That are now, that I remember when I represented, that are now in Superior Court as habitual offenders. And it's heartbreaking. And I see, I remember a young man in particular, he was a good kid and his mother was trying. And he was in Superior Court now 20 years later, and it breaks my heart. And that was one of the reasons I applied, in thinking now district court, we have so many more services and programs available than when I started 25 years ago. And I looked at him and I thought, gee, maybe if we had Project North back then, or the GED programs that we have now, maybe he wouldn't be here.
Yeah. And are these the kinds of clients who, and you know, we call them emerging adults now in that in between phase. Are these the kinds of clients who would have like spent time in the county house of corrections and things like this? And is that for like, let's say, I don't want to put words in your mouth. I'm thinking of that younger cohort, 18 to 22, 23, 24. Is the house of correction a good place for them to be kind of put on the right path?
Well, it goes down the subject now of juvenile justice. And I think respectfully, the district court should have a stronger role in juvenile justice and not leave it to juvenile court. We all have seen the science now, roughly under 25 and under with brain development. And as I said, I've seen too many young individuals now starting at that young age, not getting the help they need, not being recognized for the help they need, and ended up in Superior Court at some point in time. So I did visit, still do visit clients in that age range. And I think, in my humble opinion, the age for jurisdiction for juvenile should be raised. And go ahead, I'm sorry.
Well, I have friends who disagree with that. I agree with you. Folks I speak to regularly who are on the bench, folks in the legislature, and they push back on me and tell me that having what we traditionally consider juveniles, adolescents, teenagers, with the population of 18 to 22, 23, that somehow that's going to bring down, for lack of a better term, the younger folks, that it's going to be a bad influence on them to have these 18, 19, 21 and so forth. Do you have any thoughts about that? Do you think that's
I think it's a valid,
concern.
I think that's a valid point.
Yeah.
That would need more discussion and study. That is a good point.
Well, I wonder, I mean, based on what you're saying, is it just as bad for the 20-year-old to be in with the 35-year-olds?
Well, I think, I've seen too many times where a young individual is incarcerated, and what happens? They come out angry and bitter. And start down a road that, ends up in Superior Court as the years go by. And so, I just think a district court can, has a say in that and has a role in trying to stop recidivism at that early 20s age. And certainly there has to be consequences for any conduct. But I think a district court judge, I would suggest at that age, you need to look remedial and hopefully address the person going forward so they're not coming back and elevating in the severity of the crime.
Sort of related to that, I have one other question. Recently, phone calls have been made more available or accessible in our houses of correction. As a practitioner, I mean, is that something that you think is important in terms of either access to justice or does it even have an impact potentially on recidivism or on how folks re-enter the community?
Incredibly so. As you know, just recently, finally, they don't charge anymore.
Right.
Families for the phone calls. Incredible exorbitant rates for them to have just simple human contact with their family and their children and their spouses. And the rates were crazy.
Right.
And that in and of itself, the studies have shown that when an inmate has contact with their children, and myself and Councilor Jacobs discussed a program where inmates can read to their children during the phone calls. That clearly has an effect and a positive effect on recidivism and how someone is going to act when they're released. So that in and of itself, the phone calls was a huge step forward for access to justice, for them to be able to call me, for me to be able to have contact. Just recently in Bristol County, we have tablets now. I can receive emails from clients. It's on a larger scale, that's not across the state, and there are inequities within the institutions. That is an argument for another day.
For sure.
But the argument in regard to the phone calls was a tremendous step forward.
Right. And probably good for the kids at home.
Of course.
Keep on the right path too, right?
Of course.
I appreciate your perspective. I know that we're breaking fairly, so
We're gonna break.
we're not breaking. I know that we're not breaking.
We're going straight through.
Right, right. But I don't have any further questions. I appreciate your perspective and your experience.
Thank you, Councilor DiPaolo. Councilor Jacobs.
Thank you. It's great to see you. First off, just some starting things. I really appreciate you coming out to sit down with me, and we did have a really just a robust discussion that I appreciated hearing your thoughts about so many different areas, and I want to say thank you to your wife for accompanying you, and I hope you guys had a great day out in the Berkshires at the museum. I also want to echo that you have a strong supporter in your home base counselor, and I think it's well placed. So much of what I wanted to ask you about has already been discussed today, so I don't want to retread. But I just want to reflect back to you some of the things that I just appreciate so much. I really, you alluded to it today, but the conversation we had about Section 35 protocols, I think speaks so much on so many levels, speaks to who you are and how you operate and how you view our justice system, and it really landed with me. I think I'm probably going to think about it for months to come, because to me it signals compassion that you have for the experience, but also the nuance of people who are being brought in they're not criminals, they're not being charged. It lands in the district court for reasons that make sense and don't. And I had a question, I don't know if you had the answer to it, but whether or not there's a strip search involved with the intake process, which is a traumatic experience in and of itself. And when we're talking about substance abuse, there's probably trauma already as a, you know, a driving factor. And so, any context that inflames or adds trauma can only be to the detriment of a positive outcome. I want to give you a second just to talk more about it if you want to, but I think it's such a key insight that you have.
No, it's just, these are some issues that I've seen through 25 years in district court, and everyone's trying to do their best. The personnel, tremendous, the resources and the volume of cases sometimes, and sometimes it's just a capacity issue in regard to the building. But that's just one thing that I've always seen that's been thrown on my side, that I hate to see someone go under those particular circumstances when obviously someone's at one of the lowest points of their life. And tragically, and more, they're young, and they're getting younger and younger. And so anything that we can do to facilitate the treatment process while still maintaining dignity and respect of the individual is something that I'm all for.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that so much. I also wanted to comment, you spoke about it in your statement, and it's just a reality of your life, but you are representative of a community with disability. And I think we did talk about it, but there are people in my district who are in the courts in various capacities with disabilities of their own, who have spoken to me about the lack of representation at the bench, and that it's an element of diversity that they're looking for. So I almost just want to say, like, you represent for so many people a really, you know, a positive and an exciting moment for those out there who are hoping to see a reflection of themselves and also aspire themselves to this role. So I think it's just a great signal of sort of a milestone, and I think it's fantastic. Having said that, I alluded earlier, the access to justice area is sort of interesting to me, and there's so many components, and one being language access, one being accessibility access. And for me, it you know, that means so many things. So I once again, I'll throw it to you, just if there's anything you'd like to add in terms of your perceptions on where we're doing well, but how we can do better.
Well, I think first in regard to access to justice, I've been 20 years as a Bristol County Bar advocate, and fighting for people's rights that they're entitled to, and services that they need and should and are entitled to, quite frankly. And fighting for constitutional rights when sometimes it's unpopular or minimized, and fighting for the person most in need. I take that with great pride and a badge of honor to be able to do that. And so the access to justice is a constant issue on my mind. We can spend all afternoon talking about that. And I just think that from a district court point of view, Judge, it's something that if I'm fortunate enough to serve on the bench, I take all those experiences, the struggles, the people that I met, the triumphs and the losses on the bench, and I hope will make me an understanding and compassionate judge on the bench. In regard to accessibility of language, Raquel and I talk about that a lot. She is a translator for the Portuguese clients at her legal services office in New Bedford. And I was born and raised and live in New Bedford, where it's a diverse population. And most of the gateway cities are the same way, with Fall River, where I practice a lot too. And the accessibility with language for services is a tremendous issue. And it's an ongoing issue. And as a district court jurist, if I'm ever lucky enough, it's the recognition of that issue and recognition of how that issue affects a person.
No, I really appreciate that. And just as like a second to go back to the language accessibility issue, you know, we have the, you know, numerous foreign languages, but also for the deaf community, sign language interpretation. There's someone in my district who we haven't managed to do it yet, but I'm looking forward to the opportunity at some point to shadow her as she works with lawyers in their offices, but also at the jails and in the courts. But when we were talking, she was telling me, and I do want to understand this much better, but she was sharing I think partially because going back to what was said earlier, the fees structure for how it's paid, there's a real shortage of Massachusetts-based interpreters. And to solve that, they're literally bring in sign language interpreters from the West Coast, which the costs of that have got to be astounding. Because when it seems to me an easier fix is to increase salaries that we're paying to ideally increase the numbers that we have here in this state. It just, the logic of that escapes me, but it's a real issue in this state. I don't want to be quoted on this number because it can be incorrect, but she had said there were 3 in Massachusetts and that's just not enough. So I don't know for sure that that's the actual accurate number, but it's one of just so many areas where access to justice is really an issue that deserves our attention and where we can probably do better. I feel like I could ask you questions all day and just, there's so much about you I find fascinating, and I just want to leave it with just sort of a blanket perception that I have of you, that you really are, you uniquely see people for who they are and have sort of the humility to not make assumptions, but really listen. And I've heard that reflected from your witnesses and from you in the conversations that we've had. And I appreciate that. I think it's a really important trait to see on the bench. So I just want to say thank you. I'll echo the thank you for your application and thank you for all your time.
Thank you, Councilor Jacobs. I've been here just short 10 years. I've said yes to about probably 275 judges. Your resume is spectacular. Has to be like one of the very best I've ever seen, especially for the district court. I agree with Judge, you're saying that you could go to the Superior Court or the SJC, wherever you want to go. And I would vote yes. You're smart, you're compassionate, you're caring, just incredible. Your parents ought to be extremely proud. So thank you for giving us Heath. He's just a great person and can't wait to see him on the bench. It looks like you have unanimous support in the council. And when the governor's office tells us, we'll vote on it maybe next week or the week after. But I want to thank the governor, Lieutenant Governor Page and Dara and everyone else who saw it, and our own person right here who helped you through, Valerie, for putting you in that seat and giving us the opportunity to say yes or no. And I want to introduce a dear friend who first 125 judges we made together. Sharon Shelfer Casey just walked in the room, clerk magistrate in Cambridge, and she just came back for a visit. And Sharon was incredible. She was Paige Scott Reed back in the day, and Dara. It's great. It's great to see you. Great to see you. So we're gonna break. What's gonna happen next is the Lieutenant Governor's gonna file in a moment. It's gonna be about a 5-minute thing. We're gonna vote on notary publics, just of the peace. We're gonna vote on whether somebody's gonna become a judge today, somebody we had a hearing for recently. And it'll be about a 5-minute hearing. You're welcome to stay or you can leave, whatever you want to do. But our hearing is concluded for Mr. Antonio. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.